Father Pfeiffer is the priest who compiled the book on Father. So he's kind of the reason for the thing.
The numbering is messed up on that list.
No, it's not messed up because there's 10 priests with Father. Remember, Father Pierre-Marie signs on behalf of all of his priests. There's 10 of them. I thought it was 9, but it's 10 including him. Somebody must have been missing when I was there. I counted 9 when I was there. Somebody was missing. So sometimes they go out. Maybe someone was in school when I met the last time. So there's 10 priests. Plus Father Bruno, who's a Benedictine, but he's staying with them. So there's actually 11 priests staying there. But one of them is a Benedictine. And the other 10 are Dominicans.
Is Father Boyle's brother one of them?
Yeah, he's one of the 10. He's one of the 10. So his name is there by being with Father Pierre-Marie. And Father Pierre-Marie, he told me he was waiting he wanted to see society priests stand up. I told him, said, I'm a society priest, I stood up. They didn't accept that. And then what do you call it, waiting for the society priest to stand up, and then his main thing is Father Pierre-Marie was there has to be a seminary. Of course, primarily in France. And so in this declaration, my guess is Father Pierre-Marie agreed to sign it because of the seminary. Because he believed that there has to be not only a resistance against Menzingen, but there has to be a future. And the future is the seminary. And that so there's a hope for the future by this forming of priests. So he considered that the most important thing. And that's what he told me. And I think that's probably the primary reason why he went ahead and signed, that there's multiple priests in France signing. Plus, of course, I think the Rosary Crusade was a major, the new Rosary Crusade it was a big blunder on the part of Bishop Fellay. He can't quit, He's fulfilling the prophecy that Father Buffet gave to Father Chazelle and me last year. He said, if things get quiet, Father Buffet told us, don't worry. Nothing happens for a couple of months. Don't worry. Just be patient. Bishop Fellay will do something else stupid. And that's what he's been doing. He's been self-destructing. In other words, the 3 causes of this crisis are all avoidable from the perspective of Bishop Fellay. I mean, the priests who were liberal already didn't put Father Pfeiffer's book in the bookstore. And Father Pfeiffer's book didn't really have much of an impact in the real world because people read the book and thought it was great. Other people read the book and thought it wasn't great. And the people that thought it was great did nothing. And the people that thought it wasn't great did nothing. So what's the big deal about the book? Bishop Fellay gave a condemnation. So anybody who wants to listen to that condemnation, let them listen. Those that don't want to listen, leave them alone. Because if you push them too hard, it's like if you back an animal in a corner, and the most peaceful little cat might turn violent on you. And so leave them be. But he wouldn't do that. And so the condemning of this book and being more vociferous about condemning this book was just making the matters worse. And then the condemning of Father Pinot. The condemning of Father Pinot was a disaster. Father Pinot forbidden to say Mass, even privately, because he did a spell check on the critical letter of February of last year. And it was insane giving that crazy of a condemnation, because if he gave a lesser condemnation, Father Pinot probably would have accepted it. But when you tell him he can't say Mass even privately, and he can't hear confessions, and he can't teach catechism, and he can't do any priestly function, he's essentially defrocked as a priest, when obviously he has no right, Bishop Fellay has no right to do that anyway. Well, what's Father Pinot going to do? He's going to leave. And so what's that going to do for Bishop Fellay? Make matters worse for him. And then the Rosary Crusade, the 3 conditions of the Rosary Crusade. I don't know what the reaction is. What's their reaction to the Rosary Crusade right now in St. Isidore's? They just announced it a couple of weeks.
They're doing it.
Because the Rosary Crusade has 3 conditions. The first one is for the success of the traditional apostolate within the church. That indicates, supposing we pray for the success of the apostolate of the Legion of Mary. What does that indicate? That in the parish there may be other apostolates. There's the apostolate of the League of Christ the King, the apostolate of the Men's Guild, or Holy Name Society, and so on. So if you pray for the success of the apostolate of the Legion of Mary, It means there's another apostolate. So if we pray for the success of the traditional apostolate, it means there's another apostolate. Now, what apostolate in the Catholic Church is not traditional? Since Jesus Christ founded the church. There is no non-traditional apostolate. The other apostolate is a Novus Ordo apostolate. We don't accept that. Furthermore, the success of the traditional apostolate, whom does it include? The word traditional, Obama is traditional. Rush Limbaugh is even more traditional. Many priests are traditional. And Sedevacantists are traditional. Indults is traditional. Liberals are traditional. Everybody is traditional now. You can even join the TFP and be a tradition, family, and property. Everybody's traditional. So if you just have this vague traditional apostolate, then it includes whatever you want it to include. It's inclusive language. That's the special language of the modernists, and try to say something that can mean anything. So the first one is a vague condition, which includes the liberal apostolate. To pray that Rosary Crusade for those intentions is a sacrilege and a blasphemy against Our Lady. The second intention is worse. That's the one to pray for the, the return of tradition within the church. The return of tradition within the church. Now, the true church can never return to tradition because it's traditional. So that is a lie. Because the true church and tradition can never be separated from one another. There could be no return. In the normal expression, the tradition, especially in France, but also here, we say the tradition has to do something. What are we referring to? All traditional Catholics. When we say tradition, we mean, if we say there's a crisis in tradition, what does that mean? And when we say it like that, it means the traditional Catholics who are fighting against modernism. So if we pray for the return of tradition to the church, within the church, that means that tradition is not in full communion with the church. And it must return to full communion with the church. In other words, the SSPX, the independent priests, and the Sedevacantists, and all those who could be called tradition, are outside the full communion of the church. And that is another lie. Thirdly, a third possible meaning of return of tradition to the church is the return of the true tradition to the conciliar church. That's also a lie. Number one, it can't return to the conciliar church because it was never there. And number two, we don't need tradition inside of Lutheranism, inside of Islam, inside of the false churches. Tradition only in the true church. So even if we pray for the return of tradition, we want the Lutherans to go back to their traditional core values as Lutherans. No, we don't. We want them to become Catholic. So if we pray for the return of tradition to the conciliar church, that's a lie. If we pray for the return of traditional Catholics to the true church, that's a lie. And if we pray for the return of true tradition to the true church, that's a lie. Ambiguous statement with three possible meanings, all lies. Therefore, to pray for that intention under any one of the three meanings, or all three if you like.
Four lies. The tradition also means the SSPX in Europe especially.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, tradition, that's the second meaning. That tradition refers to SSPX, independent priests, Sedevacantists, anybody who claims to be traditional Catholic.
But they also apply that term exclusively to themselves, like they are tradition.
Yes, so we do the same thing here. We use the same expression here, tradition. But the thing is that so tradition can mean only SSPX, but normally means more than that. SSPX plus all who hold the position of the SSPX. That's what we mean by tradition. And that's a second meaning. It's a lie. And so that's what somebody pointed that out on the internet, that second meaning. And then of course they tried to change the translation in English. In French, it's pretty easy, de la tradition, which means of the tradition. And they translated it into to the tradition, to try to make it less offensive, because to the tradition sounds better than of tradition. So we want church to return to tradition. Well, that's false. The true church can never turn to tradition. The conciliar church just needs to die. What we need is the authorities to return to tradition. That's good. To pray for the authority to turn to tradition. To pray for the Pope to return to tradition. That's good. That's no problem. But to pray for the conciliar church, no. To pray, and so that's enough. Those things are grave errors, you see. And then Bishop Williamson did not sign. My name didn't go in because of some glitch in the paperwork. Father Pfeiffer sent it to me. Father Pfeiffer, then his name's not there. Maybe some pressure was applied on him and he didn't sign his name, or I don't know, or maybe there was another breakdown in communications. But with Father Bishop Williamson, he didn't sign it because of the fact that it mentions a seminary. And Bishop Williamson doesn't believe that there should be a seminary. Even though he's going to come and do the ordinations and all that, he doesn't believe in it. He thinks it can't be a seminary because the guys are basically losers, which is true, they are losers. But that's always been true, though. That's not something new. It's always been that way.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, but the idea is, I think he's lacking the supernatural. There's a missing of the supernatural. Because, humanly speaking, no man can be worthy of the priesthood, and there's no material that God can use, humanly speaking, to be good enough for the priesthood, other than the humanity of Jesus Christ, that specific humanity that he hypostatically united himself to. But other than that, no human being can be worthy, even remotely worthy, and that includes the greatest of the saints, of the priesthood. And the difference between how worthy St. Pius X was to be a priest and how worthy Judas was to be a priest is like 1 millimeter. See, it's like the Richter scale. The number 9 is twice the number 8. 8 is twice the number 7. 7 is twice the number 6. So between 9 and 1, there's like an infinite difference. And like on the Richter scale, you could say St. Pius X was a 1 worthy of being a priest out of a 9. And Judas was a 0.25. So the difference between Judas and St. Pius X worthiness, St. John Vianney, but St. John Vianney worthy to be a priest, and Judas worthy to be a priest, the difference isn't very much between the two. Even though St. John Vianney is a great saint. But between John Vianney and what it is required to be a priest, there's an infinite gap. So if you look by the natural perspective, the holiest of the saints can never be worthy of being a priest. That's obvious. You don't even have to have any brains to figure that one out. That's totally obvious because the priest holds God in his hands.
Isn't that why St. Francis of Assisi didn't become a priest?
Yes, that's true, but that's why he refused to become a priest. He wasn't worthy. But that was a special grace for him. I think part of the reason St. Francis didn't become a priest because later on in the church they started ordaining every monk. And because Francis didn't get ordained, I think that helped other monks to realize, no, you don't have to be this. Later on, for instance, in the 20th century, in the 19th century, if you got 100 monks, 80 of them are priests, and 20 of them are lay brothers. Whereas in the old days, when you had 500 monks, 450 of them were lay brothers, and only maybe 50 or less than that were priests. Very small number became priests. The monastery was its own monastic life. And in the last couple of 100 years, the monastic life has decreased in importance in the church when it's the most important life. It's a greater life, the way they live, than the priest's life. So St. Francis not becoming a priest becomes like a reminder to other later saints that no, the monastic life is a sacred life without being a priest. So it's probably an inspiration that, because obviously no one's worthy to be a priest, but he did say that's the reason. And many of the saints refused to become bishops for that reason, but then they were forced to become bishops, and some of them didn't become bishops. Some of the saints didn't become bishops. Other saints did become bishops. And so it's in some saints didn't become priests, others didn't. Like, Gregory the Great didn't want to be a bishop, he didn't want to be a pope. But that was too bad. They went to his monastery, they grabbed him, they dragged him out, they dragged him into Rome, they ordained him a bishop, and then he became pope. And that was it. The fact that he didn't like it, they didn't really care. And so he was forced to be pope. And he became one of the greatest popes of all time. But he was forced to be pope. He didn't want to be pope. And so I think that, that what I'm talking about there is not the one, like Francis, he did true, but what I'm talking about is something deeper than that no one can be worthy of being a priest. Just like nobody can be worthy to be Catholic. It's the same thing. Obviously, priesthood is much greater, but no one can be worthy of baptism. No one can be worthy of receiving absolution for their sins. It's just not possible. But God does it anyway, just because He's a nice God. but the fact is that no one can be worthy of it. That's patent. And I think Bishop Williamson's lost sight of the supernatural side of the battle. He sees so much the weakness of man's nature, but really, when you look at human beings, supposing you took an average man born in 1123 AD, and you took him as a baby, and you put him in a time machine, and you brought him forward and put him in an average family of today, how would he grow up? Would he grow up like a medieval man? Or would he grow up with the Walkman and this is iPod and his cell phone and his internet connection and his drug buddies? What would he grow up with? He wouldn't grow up like a medieval man. See? So his nature was formed in 1123. Would you put him in a time machine? Once he was formed, he would just start getting mad and probably killing a lot of people. If he was already 20 or something and he saw the people today, he would just pull out a sword and start whacking everybody. But if he was a little baby and he was just taken as a baby, he would, like one of our parishioners in America, she was born in Patna, India, and she doesn't speak a word of Hindi or the local language of Patna, and she doesn't have an accent at all because she was raised in America. She doesn't know a word. And so that's how it is, But in any case, you better... Okay, we got a couple minutes. Put it back on. Anybody have any questions or complaints?
How do we get access to that?
Okay, this has just got put on the internet today, and somebody emailed it to me, but it should be this thing, and apparently it's got a previous note and a post note. The previous note is condemning Father de Cacré, who's superior of France. Father Rieu wanted him to sign. They were hoping that he would, join. Father de Cacré, they want him to be the leader of the French. Well, he chose not to join in. And so he says, Father de Cacré has abandoned tradition by doing that. Okay. And by accepting the June 27, 2013 bad letter, And then there's a letter afterwards which says something else. I don't know, I didn't read that. But we told me it says something like, growing concern of the signs of our change of mindset in the tradition. Many college faithful certainly already know my position, but months appeared to me more clearly to need this expression publicly. Fishing I can refusal to shoot which general house seeks to impose. There can no longer be good challenges. Blah 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 blah. So anyway, I didn't read the post part and the previous part yet. I only got the letter. I signed it. I sent it back. They didn't put my signature in there. And then, because I think what happened was that I sent it to somebody else. Father Rieu was the one who was supposed to receive it. So I just sent it back to the person that sent it to me. And I guess they didn't forward it to Father Rieu. That's probably what happened, just a technical breakdown. But nonetheless, this mentioning of the we got the 45 names there. Most of them are already, half of them are already part of the resistance.
Are they all over France, or are they?
They're all over the world.
Is Father Dong, has he really,
Father Dong is not on this list. Oh, wait a minute, is he? No, he is in there. He is. I spoke with him, and I've got to recontact. I lost his phone number. I had his number in Africa, and now I've lost it. I don't know what happened to it. I thought I saved it in my phone, but I can't find it. So, I got to get his African number again, because I'm supposed to go over there and visit, and then he's going to try to come over here and so on. And so he did sign for the Dong. That's good.
What do you expect Bishop Blake to do?
If he's smart, he'll do nothing. That's the smartest thing to do. But probably he won't do that. Because, when you're angry and when you see red, they say you can't see any other color. If he does nothing, these priests will probably just stay in their priories and feel like they did their duty. At least many of them. And that's the wisest thing to do. If he throws them out, then they'll be forced to at least establish a small chapel, which is what they'll do, and that'll at least save some souls. But we need, hopefully, one or two of these priests really stands up and starts going fully to battle, and not just writing things, but actually establishing parishes, providing the sacraments, teaching the faith, forming seminarians, getting ready the foundation of lay, opening up schools, all the things that we have to do until the chastisement comes. And then when it comes, then we deal with that, Bishop Fillet should do nothing, but probably he'll take action. Start pulling out sledgehammers. Most likely.
Do you think he could get District Superior Dicacre to do his bidding?
He already did. Contra factum non fit argumentum, we say in Latin. Against the fact there is no argument. He already did his bidding. It was Father Dicacre who smashed Father Riu, Father Salanov, and Father Pino.
But he defended the book.
I know, he defended the book. But he already obeyed Benzingen and smashing 3 priests.
Oh.
And I talked to him about that. And his answer was, he didn't really have an answer. I did talk to him about that in April of last year, and he says, there was no excuse for your actions. And he said, but they were disobedient. I said, okay, what did they do? They had a bad spirit. Did they say anything that was wrong? No. So if they said the truth, they just said nothing that was wrong, why are you punishing them?
What did he say?
Because they did it in the wrong way. What's the wrong way? What's the right way? You see, you can't throw someone in prison because they smiled at you the wrong way. You have to throw them in prison because they committed a crime. See? And that crime, for instance, supposing they were even accused of insubordination. Insubordination, happens when an inferior speaks disrespectfully to a superior and for no reason, no good reason. But if an inferior, like the magic thing in the army, you are a moron, sir, you are a moron, sir. Sir, you make me sick, sir. Right now, if the private says that to the captain, he can't do anything about it. Because the private has a right to his opinion. So long as the private says sir in the beginning and sir at the end, and he obeys all the orders, the captain has to live with the fact that his private hates him. That's part of military life. You hate 2 things when you're in the army. You hate the enemy and you hate the general. That's just part of military life. Because everything goes wrong in your life, it's the commander's fault. And then you also hate the bad guys, so you hate them both. That's part of being in an army. And so if they speak in a way that is discouraging or disparaging, that's just too bad.
So would you say those French priests committed insubordination?
No, of course not. They did not fulfill insubordination. If they spoke the truth and spoke it correctly, they cannot be condemned. They correctly quoted Bishop Fillet. They correctly demonstrated how his quotes were contradictory. They correctly demonstrated how his quotes were contrary to the position of the Society of St. Pius X, Archbishop of Lefebvre, and the Catholic faith. And they requested for him to do one of 2 things. Retract his erroneous statements and restate clearly the true ones and back them up only, or resign. Well, that's very reasonable. And so the proper thing for the general to do is to show to his subjects that he does hold the position of tradition, and he does hold the position of the army, and he holds the truth. That's a proper response. And then if they disobey him in any legitimate command, smash them. No problem. Provided they disobey him in a legitimate command, and provided that he answers them. A superior has an obligation towards his subjects, not only subjects towards superiors. That's a part of justice they forgot to study in the new seminaries.
I got another question. It's a different country. Is Father Prior of Goda, Altamira,
Yes.
is he on the list?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on the list.
Oh, yeah.
But those are guys that are already with us. Father Fuchs, there's 45 names and of course I'm missing for some reason, but the rest of them are already, only 20 of them are new names. Or 23, they say. I counted 22. 2 I don't count because they're Sedevacantist. And 2 are Father Altamira and Father Fuchs, who already joined last week, so I didn't count that. I counted 18 myself, but when you add Altamira and Fuchs, that would be 20. And then you add 2 Sedevacantists, that's 22. And then I don't know who 23 is. I missed them somewhere along the line, so I'm missing one of them. I don't
And then I
know.
have another different question.
Yeah.
Over a month ago now, the Pope said something really rude about our mother and her place at the cross and how she was angry
Mm-hmm.
that her son was killed. So it's a really strange thing. Because is there any society of priests or bishops speaking out against that?
No, nor anything else for that matter. You know, I mean, I just read on the website the concerns about the canonization of John Paul II, and it's Bishop Fillet says a few things. You know, he doesn't mention Assisi; he leaves that out, but he mentions other things. He mentions some problems with John Paul II, but he's not clear in saying this man has no right. He says there's doubts and there's concerns when there's more than that. John Paul II promoted heresy. John Paul II's leadership in the church led millions of souls to hell. Now, he may personally have saved his soul because of ignorance, because he was forgiven at the end. No, it's his personal salvation. He may have personally saved his soul. It's possible. But he should not in any way be canonized as saint, because that, solidifies or backs up his actions, his public actions. And his public actions were wicked. I think you could argue honestly that John Paul II was most likely, as far as we can see, a very sincere man, unlike Benedict XVI. He was sincere. There was a consistency in John Paul II's liberalism from the beginning to the end. It never changed. And he was consistent with everybody. He didn't have one face for the good guys and one face for the bad guys and one face for the friends and one face. He had only one face. And those are all signs of sincerity and honesty, even though his face was liberal and wrong. You could respect him as an honest and sincere liberal. Unlike Benedict XVI, who put on many faces. You know, we have the same. When somebody's two-faced, what does that mean? It means that they're a bad man. You know, and so John Paul II was not two-faced. However, he was consistently contrary to the Catholic faith.
Were canonizations ever considered infallible statements?
Okay, it's a new thing. Myself, I don't think his canonization is a big deal. I mean, in other words, it's bad. It just goes to the whole modern church. It's just it's like a pimple on a cancer. I mean, yeah, okay, so cancers attack your liver and they attack your whole body and make you die, but they also create, acne, right? You know, make your face not look good. I think it's like a pimple. It's non-essential. It's bad, you know, you don't want pimples on your face, you know, but it's secondary.
But it can't be used by liberals as a statement to say, well, if you
They are doing that.
infallibility of Pope,
Yes.
and you disagree with this guy, then you're
That's the argument. That's the argument. I think it's a weak argument, which is why I stick with the pimple theory, that it's bad, but it's like bad like a pimple is bad. And the reason is because before the 20th century, you had no talk of the infallibility of canonization. And when we talk about the infallibility of canonization, that's something that came up in the 19th century and the 20th century among theologians, and it's in the study of apologetics, and they're called derived dogmatic facts is what they're called. They are derived infallibility. And there is something true to dogmatic facts, but for instance, one dogmatic fact is that guy, skinny guy with glasses, is Pope. Otherwise, you couldn't say his extraordinary infallible declaration on the Assumption was infallible. If he wasn't the Pope, then his infallible declaration on the Assumption was not infallible. Or, you know, and so at least not by extraordinary means. It would be infallible only by ordinary magisterium. So therefore, these are called dogmatic facts. One of the dogmatic facts is canonization. The argument is the church cannot do something that is harmful to souls. Now, to canonize someone who is a heretic or wicked would cause the harm of souls, because people are going to follow him in his wickedness and in his heresy. Therefore, the church must be infallible in the canonization of saints by a derived infallibility. Well, the church can do practical things that harm souls. They do it all the time. Bishops, for instance, like one example is a priest in the confessional yells at somebody and kicks him out for no good reason. A pope murders the guys that didn't elect him, like Pope Urban, whatever it is, did. He murdered the 9 cardinals that didn't elect him. He bribed the other ones, and then the others were his buddies, and the 9 didn't vote for him. The first thing he did as Pope was he killed them all. What was that? What did that do? That caused a grave scandal in the church, causing the great Western Schism. Because then the popes that did elect him, they were mad because he murdered them, so they had another conclave and elected another pope. And so, which is the false pope. The false pope was a nice guy, and the real pope was a murderer. And so that was back in the beginning of the Great Western Schism. Those are true cases of the church, the priest, the pope acting in such a way as to harm souls. And it did harm souls and harm the whole Catholic Church. It harmed the prestige of the church. It caused people to leave the church. It laid the foundations for Protestantism. It did all kinds of evil. And so, but those are facts. And the canonization of a saint, I think, is somewhat similar in that you're canonizing one individual. You don't have to believe as a Catholic that this particular human being is in heaven. You believe that all of those who died in the state of grace are in heaven. You have to believe that. And all the church is saying, this individual died in such a state and was perfect at the time of death. That's what the church is saying. And so, to argue that is, full infallibility of the church, I think is kind of weak. That's my opinion. And you don't find it in previous writings. It doesn't exist before the 19th century. In fact, remember, the first saints were never canonized. The 12 apostles were never canonized. Anthony was never canonized. Anthony of the Desert was never canonized. Jerome, all of the Augustine, they were never canonized. They died, and the people upheld them as saints, and they started saying masses. And then they cut up their bones and threw them in made relics out of them. They never canonized them. So by a modern argumentation, we can't know that Augustine's in heaven. See the flip side of that question.
Right.
It's an argument, it's a dispute, but I personally just don't, I think it's, that's my opinion, so we better pack it in here, so.